Now, the man who shot and killed 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbett in Liverpool last year will be sentenced for murder later today.
And with former Olympian Oscar Pistorius being denied parole last week for murdering his girlfriend 10 years ago, questions have been raised about the sentencing process for serious crimes.
So, are courts too lenient? Should life mean life? Well, joining us now to discuss this is former prisoner Mark Johnson, who says criminals have the ability to rehabilitate. Meanwhile, GB News presenter Nigel Farage says we need to get tougher on those who have committed a serious crime.
Well, let's start with you then, Mark. So lay out your position. So you believe in rehabilitation, don't you?
Yeah, not only do I believe in rehabilitation, I believe that in the courts and the process of the courts as well, and I also follow the data. So the reconviction figures of like people who've served life sentence are only 4% over 5 years, when actually the real issue is the group below that. So you've got an overall reoffending figures of over 60% within 2 years and 80% within 10 years of that group. And what I sort of reject is this polarisation over these heinous crimes versus the actual public interest in what's happening within the prison and probation system today.
Nigel Farage, I'd like to bring you in now. We have the sentencing today of Thomas Cashman, a child murderer. Would you like to see this guy rot in prison forever? Or today there's a bounty on his head, apparently, Nigel, of £250,000 to have him bumped off in jail. Is jail too good for him?
Look, I think getting involved in this particular case may not be helpful, but there's a bigger, broader debate. And Lee Anderson, the MP, Conservative MP for Ashfield, raised it a couple of months back. He said he was in favour of the death penalty. Now, of course, the London elite went absolutely berserk. How dare anybody even suggest that? But when you poll the country, about half the people think we probably should have the death penalty. Here's the point. When the death penalty was removed, back in the mid-1960s, it was done in a vote in Parliament with a very, very specific promise. And that was that for the very worst of crimes, life would mean life. That was the contract with Parliament. That was the contract with people. And it's not being met. You know, I get Mark's broader point about the role of rehabilitation and how important it is and how reoffending rates for theft, burglary, assault are much, much higher than we want them to be. But in the specific case of people who commit outright murder, let's be clear, life should mean life. And if it doesn't, then the contract with the British public has been broken.
So, Nigel, what about the cost of a lifer as well? I mean, some of the figures are eye-watering. Up to £87,000 a year, £240 a night to keep people in maximum security jail. That's more than a luxury hotel. Do the public have a right to be appalled about the sheer cost of this as well?
Well, they do. They've got even bigger right, I think, Martin, to be appalled by the cost of foreign criminals in our prisons, who should, without doubt, be sent back to their original countries. But look, when it comes to getting the judicial system right, cost is a factor, but it's not the factor. The factor is having public trust in the whole system. And I think the reason that Lee Anderson got the reaction he got is that people increasingly are feeling that even for the worst kinds of murder, people will serve 10 to 15 years in prison and then in many cases be out. And there is a general, broad feeling that that is just wrong.
Bring you in at that point, because we did see, didn't we, former Olympian Oscar Pistorius. He was denied parole last week for murdering his girlfriend. He's only served 10 years and could be up again for parole as soon as next year, serving just 11 years for a horrific murder.
It's, I mean, the UK has the highest rates of imprisonment in Western Europe. And, like, serving whole life sentences, we've only got to look across the Atlantic to America to see that, they lock up a lot more people, yet their reconviction figures are a lot more higher. I mean, the idea of bringing back the death penalty is a terrible one as far as I'm concerned. I mean, the data as well around acquittals post-execution speak for themselves. But also, it's this idea of, like, in a civil society, you know, the one thing that makes us different to people who commit murder is the ability to kill. And, you know, and I think that that kind of needs to be taken out of the discussion altogether. The thing that I'm really worried about is the public are educated via the media. The media generate these sensationalist stories and actually lack detail. And I remember in 2010, an Ipsos public survey opinion poll for Jack Straw actually was very similar to the recent one that RAB announced about swift justice for offenders. And it said, the public want to know that politicians are being tough on crime, but they don't want to know any of the detail. And I think that's where we are today, is we need to get involved in the detail around making sentencing effective, making prison sentences effective, making sure that the governors of each prison are actually got the tools and equipment and programs to make, and also being responsible of measuring that people don't come out and do the same thing after they've been in their prison, and the same as probation. I mean, today with probation, they're 100% caseload today. So whether we like it or not, we want a lot more people up. It doesn't work, and we're ultimately the public's going to pay for it. One is financially, but also with the reconviction figures.
Nigel, big story on the front of the papers today, of course, is the clamping down on grooming gangs. Long overdue calls for tougher sentencing on them. We've seen instances of rapists being let out after just serving 1 or 2 years. What would you like to see sentencing-wise for the grooming gang leaders? How hard would you like to go on these kind of criminals?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. There should be incredibly long prison sentences for people like that. I mean, look, you know, we are where we are because of this fear of being accused of racism. Just in the last few days, Michael Vaughan, former Yorkshire and England captain, has been cleared after 2 years of his life were destroyed by claims of racism. The chairman of Cricket Scotland resigned over the weekend because they now say he hasn't found enough racism. So, you know, I'll believe it when I see it, if the police really do go hard over these grooming gangs. But just you wait. There will be the most massive backlash coming from what we call civil society, by which we should mean the London elites. So, as ever with Suella Braverman, you know, I admire what she says. I just as yet haven't seen any delivery on this or any other issue. But I think, frankly, what happened in Rotherham and elsewhere, all around the world, is a stain on our country. Tough talk is great. Action will prove, I think, much harder.
Mark, what do you make then of those who have been convicted of the most serious crimes, murderers, rapists, grooming gang members? I mean, when we're talking about sentencing, what do you think would be appropriate for those who have been found guilty of the most heinous crimes?
Look, the sad thing in this country, in the detail of it, when you get sentenced in a prison, I believe in the justice system. I believe that the judges are equipped to make the appropriate sentences. The thing that is the most worrying thing is when somebody goes to prison, justice in this country is so far detached from reality. These people go to prison and they're so neglected, and that'll generate, well, they should be and we should lock them up. But 22 hours a day bang up behind a cell door. And the worst thing is nobody's ever questioned about their crimes. And I'm talking individually. And if I was a prison governor, as an ex-prisoner, as an ex-rehabilitated prisoner, actually, if I was a prison governor, they would be faced with what they've done every single day of their prison sentence. And I would invite the public in to watch this rehabilitation process take place. And when I've been part of programmes and stuff, and I've taken people into prison, which I would like to invite Nigel, actually, actually their opinions change once they actually see that actually something really needs to be done daily with these people whilst they're serving these sentences. And it's just not, I'm afraid.
Well, Mark, that's an offer you made to Nigel. Nigel, is that an offer you'd be prepared to take up, to go inside a jail, spend time with offenders and maybe see the different side of the story?
I've met Mark before. I do not doubt for one moment his sincerity. And if we could get better rehabilitation rates and fewer people coming out of prison and then going back in within 2 years, well, the whole of the country will be better off. So, Mark, I absolutely accept your offer. No, I absolutely accept it.
Right.
I think, we're talking here about general crime as opposed to murder and life sentences. But yes, I accept.
Great. Well, you heard it here first. Nigel Farage is going to go into jail. A lot of people would like to see you there for other reasons, but only just joking, boss. Mark Johnson, thank you very much. That sounds like a great GB News show in the making. Nigel Farage, look forward to seeing that one. Thank you both for joining us this morning.